Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us today for our Tackling Cost of Living Crisis webinar. This is in partnership with Bradford District Council and the Public Health and the Bradford District Credit Union, with support from ABCUL. We're very grateful for everybody involved. This would normally be Liz Barclay speaking, but she's having technical difficulties coming on. So I'm just taking over for the beginning of this. To reiterate the welcome, and we're actually going to start with a video from Councillor Martin Love, who is our present Lord Mayor of Bradford. So Jackie, if you might load in that.
I welcome you all to International Credit Union Day 2022. It is unfortunate that I can't be with you in person, but I'm pleased to be able to welcome you via this recorded message. We have a great lineup of speakers today, and this is testament to the reputation and success of our credit union here in Bradford. The Office of Lord Mayor has a rich history of attending their events over the years, and I'm told that predecessors have been to events, opened AGMs, and been on past webinars, just as I'm doing now. Bradford is proud of its multicultural heritage, and it was the late Councillor Abid Hussain, the Lord Mayor at the time, who endorsed Bradford District Credit Union as a faith-friendly credit union, a place where people of all faiths and cultures could save ethically to benefit the community. I recently had first-hand experience of the credit union when Scott Butterfield came from the USA to visit Bradford to see what the various partnership projects, like UniformSavers, are doing to make a real difference in tackling the growing cost of living crisis for people here in our city. I welcomed him for a tour of City Hall and to high tea in my chambers, and recall how excited he was at the work Bradford was doing, of our heritage for innovation, partnership and collaboration. He saw how important credit unions are in helping people here to get into the savings habit and accessing affordable credit. We also talked about the Bradford City of Culture 2025 award and how this year-long celebration will showcase Bradford's unique qualities and open its cultural life to our local communities, to the rest of the UK, and indeed to the whole world. This award recognises Bradford's international ambitions and seeing the city's culture, creativity and artistic excellence put firmly on the map. Looking at the agenda of this webinar and knowing the national and international reputation of the Bradford District Credit Union, today's event is the starting gun to this celebration. I hope that you enjoy the webinar and note that it is also being recorded to reach a much wider audience. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you for that, Jackie. Thank you for loading that, and thank you to the Lord Mayor for his participation today. And my next guest, I'm honoured to introduce Susan Hinchliffe, our councillor and leader of the council. I just want to thank her again publicly for her support and contributions to the credit union over the years. And yeah, there you go, Councillor Hinchliffe.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. And can I first of all say happy International Credit Union Day. So it's great to be able to celebrate, and as you'll see from what I'm about to say, you know, Bradford District Credit Union has a huge role and has had a huge role in our district and the well-being of our district for many years, and obviously has a great future ahead of it as well. And sadly, we need it even more these days. So first of all, as leader of this great city, let me welcome people actually from all over the world, and especially, of course, to our American speakers and delegates to this International Credit Union Day celebration. As the Lord Mayor has just said, we are very proud of our credit union and the way they have taken a lead on modelling creative collaboration and partnership to support financial inclusion and anti-poverty work in our city over many years. When I first became leader in 2016, I already came with an awareness of the history of our credit union from my work as a councillor. And it's a story that goes back many years, in fact, predating very much so when I became a councillor, which is almost 30 years ago, when Bradford Council staff were struggling to get loans from banks during the recession in the 90s. And the council decided to set up a credit union to help staff get affordable access to credit. And it's thanks to those staff volunteers and those pioneers who had the courage and foresight to carve out a new cooperative way to support their colleagues. Now, since then, growing over the years to help more people and more people, it was the advent of payday lenders like Wonga and the rise of loan sharks that caused the council to review this threat to people already in poverty. And through our anti-poverty strategy, we identified the need for a financial inclusion development officer to raise awareness of these dangers and to grow the credit union as a safe place to get into a savings habit and access to affordable loans. Now, the council decided to fund the role that Ian Brewer, who we've already heard from Ian, that Ian has. And I'm proud to say that this sets Bradford apart from other councils and credit unions for going beyond financial inclusion to also driving community development in our city. Now, tackling poverty and social and financial exclusion is a key to ensuring all our people have good lives and reach their full potential. And today we'll hear more about innovative partnership projects, from the COVID loan that we funded at the start of the pandemic, the credit union funded really with the help of the council, to food savers and uniform savers. And I also want to pay tribute to our frontline staff at the Customer Contact Centre. Essentially, they are the A&E, the accident emergency of this cost of living crisis, and day after day meet residents and help them find solutions to a wide range of problems they face. And this team, led by Leech, demonstrates the power of the Customer Contact Centre in changing lives through projects like UniformSavers, which has helped 285 single parents start saving for school uniforms. And interestingly, over 60% of people who joined that programme have carried on saving after their initial incentive. And I think that's a really good statistic that will help those people in the future. So thank you to Scott and the team for the great work done in making UniformSavers a great success. And as the Lord Mayor already alluded to, having Scott Butterfield visit from the USA to Bradford to see how the Food Savers project is not only tackling food insecurity, but also getting people into a savings habit was a real pleasure and honour. Food Savers has been a great success, with 200 people saving at over 13 pantries. Collectively, they've saved over £10,000 together, reaching people who would not otherwise be able to access low-cost food and build this financial resilience. And I want to thank Julie Thompson and her team in Churches. I think she's also on this webinar, for their work in tackling food insecurity. They do some fantastic work. Now, our credit union in Bradford is a member of the National Association of British Credit Unions, and Ian was sponsored to go to the World Council of Credit Unions in Madison, USA, with ABCUL to talk about the project work here in Bradford. And I understand that Bradford District Credit Union are the pioneers in building the Community Development Credit Union designation with other credit unions here in the UK, based on partnership work with the USA. And we're really proud of all that work that you do. So thank you very much, Ian and team, for everything you're doing in that regard. I also want to thank the CEO, Robert Kelly, for the support ABCUL has given to Bradford District Credit Union over the years. This success could not be achieved in isolation, and I want to acknowledge the support from our public health team as well, and policy team that have been instrumental in creating strong community development partnerships with the credit union that has added over 6,000 members in the last 6 years to now over 9,000 members today. And that's a huge difference that you've collectively made. And I want to thank you all for that. Finally, I want to acknowledge the power of innovation, collaboration and business support that have collectively helped Bradford to win City of Culture 2025. And I do mention that quite a lot, but it is really key for us in our regeneration ambitions and how we're leading regeneration through culture. Bradford is really proud of its multicultural heritage, and credit unions play a big role in providing inclusive ethical and accessible savings to people of all faiths and none. Culture exists to inspire and stimulate creativity, innovation and ideas, and the international link of cities are becoming increasingly important, as are the opportunities for global connection presented by programmes such as the UK City of Culture. Now, as a council, we look forward to helping Bradford District Credit Union celebrate 30 years next year, and I want to thank all their staff and management for helping Bradford tackle the cost of living crisis. Sadly, we've never needed our credit union more than we do today. And as you listen to the speakers today and reflect on the serious issues that the cost of living crisis is having across the nation, and especially for the most vulnerable, I hope that the work we do in Bradford and that Ian does with his team, so thank you, Ian, will help inspire more projects around the country with more councils finding a way to support the credit union in their areas. So thank you very much indeed for having me here today. I'm really pleased to take part. We're very proud of the credit union, the work it does. And as I say, particularly at this moment in time, we want to work closer together to make the most difference to those people most vulnerable and most disadvantaged in our society. So thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Hinchliffe. We really appreciate your support. Thank you very much again. Yeah, thumbs up there. And Robert Kelly, my good friend Robert Kelly. I've known Robert for the 6 years that I've been working here. It's been extremely supportive. Robert was CEO of the NHS Credit Union before this. And Robert, if you'd like to introduce your segment, thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, to all guests that we have on the call today from across the world, a range of different links from Bradford. Thank you for the very kind words from the leader of the council and from the Lord Mayor as well. I mean, we are delighted as the Association of British Credit Unions to offer our support to this event today, to welcome, early welcome to International Credit Union Day and the themes that provides in terms of pushing forward the credit union agenda across the world, but particularly in our membership across GB. Bradford District Credit Union is a very prominent member of ABCUL. We're delighted to continue to offer that support. I'm going to keep the comments brief at the moment because I have another section to rejoin later on. I'm actually jumping off to join an online select committee hearing today. Credit union legislative reform package is going through Parliament. And so that's really important that we give our thoughts and opinions on that today. So I'll keep it short for the moment, but then obviously rejoin and cover more of the community development credit union model later, which has already been referenced in terms of our recent visit to Madison. Just briefly, in terms of credit union, we are, to coin a phrase that's used commonly in the States, credit unions are financial first responders to people's lives. They help people afford their daily lives. They're ethical, value-based, and they offer a solution in terms of savings and a savings culture, and providing additional services that are so important to individuals all across the country. We're serving nearly 2 million people across the country, and we want that number to increase. And never has there been such a prominent position in terms of the cost of living crisis and the day-to-day impact that's having on ordinary members of society and ordinary consumers. So we need to redouble our efforts to make sure that the credit union message gets across to as many people as possible, that we are convinced of the merits of using credit unions like Bradford and many others across our member base, across Scotland, England and Wales, and that we see the credit union sector really step up and play our part in making sure that we provide the financial resilience that so many consumers need at the moment. So delighted to be here on behalf of everyone at ABCUL. Thank you for the opportunity to support this event. A happy International Credit Union Day over the next couple of days as events are happening all across the world. And I'll talk in more detail later on when I rejoin in terms of the community development credit union designation and the work that we're doing to try and establish that protocol and structure that we believe will allow credit unions like Bradford and many others across the country to take further steps forward in serving people with the right products and services. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to rejoining later on today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. I really appreciate that, and we look forward to hearing from you later. So we're going to go straight into our first segment, and so this is going to be Caroline Lee, Sarah Exall, Rose Dunlop, Scott Leech, and Julie Thompson. if you could unmute yourself and come on to the recording, and I'll be able to see you across the top there. Brilliant. Okay, so I've got quite a lot of different things on my screen, so I can't see everybody. But Scott, are you there?
Yeah, can you see me? Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see at the moment. But we can certainly hear you, and that's the important thing there. Brilliant. Okay, so what I'd just like to start then with, oh, there you are, Scott. Fantastic. Is just to give an explanation here. Due to speakers' availability, we're starting with what Bradford is doing to help residents cope with the cost of living crisis. So the next section will actually look at the issues nationally and locally. In the order of things, that would have been better the other way round, but for speakers, that's where we've got from there. So I'm going to immediately jump into Rose and Sarah, good friends and colleagues from public health. Worked many years together. Would you like to set the scene with just telling us what public health is at Bradford Council and how you help people through the cost of living?
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, so thanks everybody, and thanks for this opportunity to be here. So so public health, we've been in local authorities now since 2013, and we moved after the Health and Social Care Act in 2012. So public health is really about prevention and upstream thinking and trying to prevent people getting ill and working with the population as a whole, whereas our clinical colleagues work with individuals. So we tend to be thinking about large groups of people, and we particularly focus on inequalities. That's a really important part of public health for us. So one of the opportunities that we've had since moving into the council back in 2013 is the opportunity to really work upstream in terms of prevention, and the opportunities that gives us working alongside our colleagues in housing, green spaces, parks. And we know from good evidence base that these wider determinants of health really impact on people's health outcomes much later in their life. So that contributes to things like your employment status, your parents' employment status, your education, your access to green spaces, and all of these things. So public health kind of work across all these different areas, trying to essentially make it easier for people to live a healthy and active lifestyle and prevent people from becoming unwell in the first place. So as part of that, obviously poverty is a key element of those determinants of health. And that is what's so important in terms of this cost of living crisis. We can recognise that there's a real risk to people's health coming, and Sarah's going to pick up a bit on some of the specific work that we do around ensuring that people have, we're supporting people that are in poverty.
Fantastic, thank you. And Sarah?
Yeah, thank you, Ian, and thanks, Rose. Yeah, so Rose has sort of set the scene about why public health is in local authorities and how important it is. And we've been really lucky in Bradford that there's such a lot of great work going on across the council to support people who are living in poverty and support people with the cost of living crisis. So as well as getting involved in some of that strategic work in the food system, in the anti-poverty world, public health has also commissioned some specific services, which I'd just like to touch on a little bit. So we're going to hear a bit more about the UniformSavers and Food Savers in a couple of minutes. And in addition, there's a couple of other examples that I'd just like to mention. So we've commissioned a project called Poverty Proofing the School Day, where a number of local schools have taken part in a pilot exercise with the help of an external charity to look at their policies and practices and how they might have a negative impact on children living in poverty. So things like uniform policy, changing uniform at the last minute and expecting people to be able to buy new uniform, paid non-uniform days, where for some children that £1 might just be unaffordable, and even things like having separate lunchtime arrangements for people, children on free school meals, that obviously just leads to stigma and difficulties for those children who are living in poverty. So the impact of those reviews a few months on is now being evaluated, and we're going to roll out the learning across Bradford. Another great project that we're doing is we commission a Warm Homes Healthy People project, which is delivered by a group of voluntary sector organisations. And the partnership takes referrals from anybody meeting really broad criteria, and it does a home visit and an assessment of people's home energy efficiency and gives advice, and it can also give some small adaptations to people's homes. So it really improves people's warmth and fuel efficiency. We've been lucky enough to get some additional funding for that through the NHS. So it really is a collaborative approach, and it's great that there's just a couple of examples of what public health can do to support people with the cost of living crisis. And it's great to be in local authorities where you know, we can do and we can influence such a lot of these big programs.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I really appreciate that. And we're very fortunate at our council to have somebody who leads the revenues and benefits. That used to be Martin Stubbs, who's now on the board of the credit union. He retired from the council and stayed on our board. But Caroline Lee has taken over from that. Caroline Lee comes to us from Oldham Council. Caroline, can you just tell us about Revs and Bens and how that fits in with the wider scheme of things?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm really pleased to be here. The Revenues and Benefits team at Bradford that I lead covers a range of services, ranging from collecting money, so collecting council tax, business rates, and a wide range of sundry debts, all the way through to providing financial support, particularly through our housing benefits scheme and administration of delivery of local council tax reduction. It also encompasses other discounts, exemptions and reliefs that people may well be entitled to as part of their personal circumstances. Sort of in addition to that, we do have a discretionary team that support with wider help that can be available for our residents that are most in need. So this includes discretionary housing payments, for example, when people need additional help with their housing costs, or our local welfare assistance scheme. And this is a scheme that we set up in order to help people with essential items such as white goods and furniture, and also with fuel top-ups when needed. And the discretionary team also help with a wide range of other support services, such as the eligibility for free school meals and also a blue badge, for example. So that kind of puts us in a really good position within the council to be able to proactively identify those people who are on the lowest incomes and in most need of support to help with cost of living crises, the crises that we faced during the pandemic. So when funding such as a household support grant fund comes along from the DWP, we're in a really good position to be able to identify those individuals and households and allocate support without the need for lengthy application processes. So for example, this winter we'll be issuing a lump sum payment just before Christmas to those households that are, which also include the eligible children.
Have we lost Caroline? Jackie?
I think so.
Jackie, are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think we've lost Caroline there. Some internet went somewhere.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I think just to quickly fill in for anybody else outside of Bradford, one of the main things that as a credit union we've been able to do, I mean, my background's international community development anyway, so I came in with those skills. But being able to work with the different departments and understand your council, build those relationships through the anti-poverty strategy, get to know the different people, puts you in the right place at the right time to build those partnerships for when funding is available, and how you can step in to the breach to co-design projects. And it's a co-design project that we're now going to move on to, because through those projects, we've been able to move our credit union from 3,000 members to 9,000 members, organic growth in just 6 years. And that pivot to community development partnership has been vitally important. So Sarah, Rose, whoever wants to answer this, we're going to hear a bit about those projects in just a moment, but can you tell us what difference the credit union makes to public health and why public health chooses to fund projects through your credit union?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ian. I mean, we know that financial stability and financial inclusion are big issues for a lot of people across the country, and Bradford's no exception. And it puts people at risk and might mean that people in desperation might turn to gambling or loan sharks, illegal money lending. that kind of thing. And we're going to hear more about those threats in the next session.
Yeah.
But I think Councillor Hinchliffe has already given a really good introduction to this and about how important the credit union is to Bradford. It offers a way into secure, safe financial institution, so that people who might be financially excluded or in crisis can open a bank account, can take out a small loan, or can start saving if they've not done any of those things before. And importantly for me, the credit union also offers advice and support for people. And I think that's a real difference for me from a usual bank account, where, you know, if people don't know how to start saving, don't know about credit scores, that kind of thing, that's something that the credit union really does really well. I'm going to pass on to Rose for a bit of a discussion about the evidence behind financial health.
Yeah, so just sort of picking up on that, I mean, one of the reasons that the credit union is so important for us in public health is because the evidence really is around what we call it in food insecurity in particular. The evidence is very strong around a cash first approach. And so instead of the sort of model of food banks where you obviously give people the food, we know that disempowers people. They don't have as much choice. It doesn't give them that autonomy. And the evidence really around how to manage food insecurity best is to empower people by giving them the cash. And that one of the ways that this creates that through some of the work we've been doing with the credit union is it gives us the opportunity to do that, but combined with that level of support as well. And obviously we're going to pick up on that a little bit more. I think you're moving forward to Julian, UniformSavers and all of that work as well. But that cash first part of the evidence base around how to help people with food insecurity is to give them that, you know, empowerment and ability to make their own choices around how they spend their money. And that's really, really important to help people feel like they've got that those skills to be able to cope through times of hardship, much more so in a way that makes them feel more valued than it might be just handing them the food to eat as such. So it's really, really important for us that we can use the credit union as that mechanism. And as Sarah said, that coupling of it with the support and the network that comes with it is really, really valuable as well. So yeah, thanks, Ian.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys. You're absolutely amazing. I'm just putting something in the chat there for Caroline. So I'm going to move on to the actual projects. This is this exciting bit. This is actually where the rubber hits the road. And I'm going to start with my good friend Julie. Julie, I think we go back 10, 12 years when we were doing the winter shelters when In Churches first started. So can you tell us about UniformSavers and how it's helping people and your work with the credit union, please?
Yeah, so UniformSavers, what is UniformSavers? Well, we save food from fill. Customers save their weekly shop, and we save into a recognised credit union scheme. So on the call, and they're from food banks. We're not trying to say that food banks aren't a great thing, but we're looking for something that, you know, to move people along. Rose has alluded to the fact that cash first is always the best option to give people empowerment, and we found that with UniformSavers. Prior to the pandemic, we were giving out mini markets to organisations around the city, and we were looking at the fact that we were using something called a pay-as-you-feel model, and we felt that was it had run its course. So we were asking our community members if they might want to go onto a pantry model. £6 seemed to be a good membership amount to pay, and during the course of that, Ian, our sort of previous understanding of the credit union, I approached you and said, well, if we put £1 of this into credit union, would that work? What we're trying to do is reduce dependency on food banks and free food, and we're combining this low cost model with easy access to the credit union. And Susan said at the beginning that we've only got 200 members. We've actually, Tess is on the call, and I think we're between Tess and Siobhan, we've got 280 members saving into the credit union. And these are people that wouldn't normally save, and they're quite astounded themselves. One lady said, you know, I've never saved before in my life. So it's really empowering. We say it's the 5 quarters of the orange. So it's behaviour change, it's choice, it's dignity, empowerment, and financial inclusion. Just before we came on the call, Tess and I were talking to 3 schools that want to come on board, and run a food savers model. We've now got 14 in Bradford, with probably another 7 in the pipeline. It's great to have the councils back in. It's great with and the food strategy as well, for that to be embedded in the food strategy. But it's such good news. It's actually a joy to be able to work on these projects with the wider support, because it really feels like people, they can have dignity, they can have the choice of food, which is really important. We do not advocate beggars can't be choosers. We think people should have choice, and a lot of it's culturally appropriate food that we offer. But more than that, we've had hot chocolate this afternoon, and people coming into cookery classes and art classes, and it kind of develops the community. So whilst we're all for sort of helping people out of crisis, I think we've got to think about the longer term approach, and we feel that with the support of the council and public health and credit union, that we're really pleased to be working on this project.
It's not just the savings behaviour, but you've had real stories. I remember the story of somebody bringing cash over the fence when we were on a call. Can you give us some examples of some people that Tess and yourself have dealt with? Just some stories there.
One of the stories that I love was a young lady that was saving. And we tried to be aspirational. So where possible, we say, what would you like to save for? So, and we all save into the credit union as well. So we feel like it's not a them and us, we're all in it together. Yeah. And one young lady said that it was a daughter's, was about 8 months old. And she said, I want to save for a balloon arch. Those fancy balloon arches that, for daughter's first birthday. And she said, and if I save up, my mum said she'll put a little bit towards it as well. So she was saving, and every time she came in, instead of handing over £6, she was putting more and more money away. And then on Facebook, she went on Facebook and she got a free balloon arch. So she came in, and it was just 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas, and she'd saved £80. So she got the free balloon arch, and then she had £80 in savings. But we had another gentleman that was really almost on the edge of suicide. He was that panicked that he'd had a bill come in and he couldn't pay it. And I said, what about your credit union? Now, once they've opened a credit union account with us, we don't have any access, and rightly so, to what they've got in the credit union. But I said, look, I'll tell you what, Siobhan at the credit union, who's our dedicated lady, I'll email her and ask her if she'll ring you. So I emailed her, and his phone rang, and I said, I bet that's Siobhan. and it was. And she was able to tell him that he'd got £85 in his credit union account. And more than that, she was able to transfer that over to his main account straight away. He went, he was absolutely thrilled that he'd forgotten about this. And Tessa's had another lady that she said, oh, do I get a free bag of shopping? And Tessa reminded, no, actually, we've been putting money away for you all. And, it was 50, I think it was about £55, but we're all about the saving. And I think people find that they wouldn't cross town and go put £2 or £3 away, but they would, they want to save, and it's it really is that behaviour change. And I think that then sort of leads them on to be able to think about budgeting. Yes, in a very small way. If they came to us and we said, all right, okay, we're going to sit down and do a budget with you, it just wouldn't be appropriate. Whereas, it just takes them further down the pathway of being able to save.
Oh, thank you for that, Julie. Yeah, I remember the other story of the lady who was able to paint her house. And you've got so many stories like that. And just for the audience, this idea of co-design, of people coming with stories or ideas, and they're working together to put it into action. And we spoke to our council, who are part funding the food savers, to be able to put it across the district. We've been able to scale up really, really fast. 13 outlets now, Julie, is that right?
14.
Well, 14, there we are. Even I've lost track. And what Food Savers funding has also been able to do is fund everybody to get £10 into their account as a saving starter. So for credit unions, you'll know opening with a zero balance is an issue. This gets over that because you get a saving starter to start with it. And also it funds Siobhan, who works with me in engagement and working with Tess and in churches. So there's a sphere below us, below Julie and myself, of people that are actually doing the work that we can help and supervise and manage. And it just makes it very manageable, but he also makes it with the support of the council and Angela Hutton, who's probably on the call, our council commissioning officer, meeting with her regularly, so we can keep it all in check, and it's sharing that best practice. Thank you, Julie. You're amazing. I love working with you.
I just wanted to add as well,
yes,
that
please.
while Scott comes on, one of the things that we're hopefully able to do with Angela's support is go back to that cash first model. So everybody that's been saving, maybe give them an uplift of about £25 into their accounts.
Oh, for Christmas.
So that would be really helpful.
We'll certainly be exploring that. Julie, you're amazing. You're an absolute star. Scott, my good buddy Scott, a quick overview to Scott from that. After the COVID loan that we were first out of the gate of councils, where the council puts money in to offer people a loan on furlough. We launched that beginning of July. That went on BBC national news. It was a big thing from that. And after that, sat down with Public Health, David Armitage, and we looked at a different scheme. And we wanted to work with the council. We knew we wanted to do it with savings. And I said, well, to work with the council, it's a big beast. We need a single point of contact. So we went away and got some funding to be able to employ with now Scott. And I love working with Scott. But as a single point of contact, that's revolutionised, a real game changer, the way we work with the council in running a very complex program like UniformSavers. So welcome, Scott. Do you want to fill us in a little bit about your side of things, of how when you came in, what it's done, and some of the stories you've seen?
Yeah. Thanks for having us on, Ian. I think Julie summed it up in just a couple of words when she said it's about people's lives, and for us in the face-to-face customer service centre, both here and in Keighley, we probably see somewhere in the region of maybe 500, 600, 700 people every single day. So we're really at the sharp end of seeing what the real issues are that people are facing. But this scheme came about really sort of during the pandemic. And what we found is that there were a lot of, especially single parent families, who were really, really scared, who were really worried about being able to afford school uniforms. And what made that really difficult in some areas was that the children had gone back to school into September, and then everything went back into lockdown again. So we were having parents coming in whose uniform were just barely weeks old, and the children had grown out of it, and they were just really, really scared about what would happen. So what we did then, just did a little bit of research, and there was a really good piece of work by Gingerbread, and they talked about the real disadvantages that single parents especially faced during COVID. And what was interesting is that run parallel at the same time as a lot of issues around the cost of school uniform and not being able to afford. So again, it comes back to, this is where collaboration works, because I think it's great that Public Health funded it. So they really got behind us and they provided the funding. The credit union, again, yourself, Ian, and Siobhan especially, absolutely fantastic in supporting us. And also, Jamie were really good as well in terms of maybe helping us to see things that we'd not particularly seen before. And then as a customer service centre, then what we need to do then is really identify the people who needed to help with this particular scheme. So we did a soft launch in the November for single parent families. And the reason for the soft launch is we want to make sure it was right and that we could iron out anything.
Maybe if we can turn the cameras off, that might sort of change the internet. Can anybody else come in for Scott?
I know Scott was having difficulties with his IT earlier. He may log off and come out of that. I think what he'd, if Scott comes on stronger again, I'll let him take back over. But just filling in between there. So again, it's a team effort. So Scott was working with Siobhan based at the credit union, and what the council did was that they met people at the point of need, as Scott just said. They identified the people in most need, told them about UniformSavers, did the application, took the ID, and the council also has access to council tax records to prove the address, which is one of the things that we need. And they were able to marry those two with the permission of the people and send it to us so that we can open the account and manage the account and work at it from there. And it took a lot to get off the ground, to be honest. But working with Scott and with Siobhan, we found a way of doing that. So by January, we were opening something like 20, 30 accounts a week. And it got even more. I think at the height, it was like 40 to 50 a week. And there was about an 8-week session where it was really at its height. And people started sharing on social media. It just went viral and really helping people in a unique way. And there's a lot of skepticism as well at the start of this as to whether we'd be able to ask. Scott, are you back with us? I can't hear you, Scott. You're on mute, Scott.
Right, am I unmuted now?
You're unmuted now. We've got about 5 minutes, Scott. Do you want to pick up where I left off?
I can't remember where I left off and started there now.
Can you tell us, there was a lot of skepticism that when people got paid their incentive, they would stop saving. You can tell us about that. We've just crunched the numbers. And can you just give us a couple of stories?
Yeah.
Go for it, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to say though that even for members of staff, as we was promoting the scheme and helping people to sign up to the scheme, we also didn't want it to become just about getting £100. People came in to see us. We spent time with the customer where we talked about other issues that they may be facing. And what we did then is we supported them and helped them through that. So for us, this was not about just about now. This was also about what would happen in 6 months, what would happen in 12 months, what would happen in 2 years' time. So for us, for us to consider this a success, it would always be about what would happen when the scheme ended. So having talked to the credit union, it looks like there's at least 60%. Right, hang on, somebody wants me to turn my camera off.
That's a good idea.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, can you still hear me?
Yeah, you carry on, Scott. Perfect.
Yeah, so all right. So for us, the success of the scheme wasn't about getting people signed up for the £100. It was about people continuing to save and getting to that thought process of it is feasible to be able, and we've had stories and experiences from people since, in terms of, for example, they were saying that for the last 2 years they've just not been able to provide the proper school uniform for the children. And when the children have been going into school, they've been bullied by other school children because the uniforms just haven't been the same sort of colour, or, you know, the same style that other children have had. So that individual came in and broke down crying after the payment had been had, and said she couldn't believe how different she felt and how different her children felt by going back into the school and just being able to wear the same uniform that everybody else was wearing. And that for me really epitomises what this scheme is all about, in terms of trying to protect and to prevent an early intervention of not just the adults' mental well-being, but also the children's mental well-being moving forward.
You're there, Ian.
I'm on mute. Sorry, of course I am. My apologies. I just ended off by saying that with 60% people going on to save after the incentive, that's a real accolade to how this has worked, and what co-design actually achieves when you sit down and work through the problems. We need to move on from that. We've reached our time on that, and thank you to all my speakers there. We're going to move on to threats to financial health and what the issues are. This is going to be led by our Sarah. Sarah, I need to nip off to go and do something there. Could you take over for this section, introduce your people, and I'll catch up with you in a few minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
So we've got a really great panel of speakers for this next section, which is about the threats that people face to financial health. So to start us off, we've got Professor Kate Pickett, who's Professor of Public Health at York University. We've also got James Grimes, who's the Head of Education at the charity Gambling with Lives. We have Salim Shafi, who's a Deputy CEO at Money Buddies, and we have Javed Khan, who's a CEO of CNET and a credit union board member. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us. So to start off with, Kate, what can you tell us about the current cost of living crisis and how it's affecting people both in Bradford and in the UK?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this event on International Credit Union Day. It is also, I don't know if people here are aware, it's also yesterday International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. And this week is Challenge Poverty Week in England and Wales. So I think that's a good conjunction of timings really for us to think about this. And this morning I was down in London. I was launching an all-party parliamentary group for Child of the North. So for us to think about how we might help protect the well-being and the future livelihoods of our children in the North. And we heard some really heartbreaking evidence this morning, actually. That was really, good evidence of how hard the cost of living crisis is already biting. So energy bills in this country doubled in 1 year, and that's quite old data now. And it's we're in a rapidly changing environment if we're thinking about energy costs. In Yorkshire and the Humber, close to 18% of households were in fuel poverty even before the cost of living crisis. And that was particularly seen among lone parents, single parents, families and others on low incomes, people living in rented housing. And all of this sort of layers up. So if you can imagine being a single parent in rented accommodation with a low income in the North, all of those things are compounding your risk of being in fuel poverty. And we know that fuel poverty has severe and long-lasting effects. for children and for adults. It's linked to more respiratory illnesses. It's linked to hospital admissions. We see effects on babies, more babies being admitted to hospital, lower weight gain in babies, but it's also affected to things like children's educational attendance and attainment. And it's really strongly linked to mental health problems. In the UK at the moment, we've seen a jump of 2.2 million households in fuel poverty. And we've got no idea really what's going to happen over the winter and even into the spring. We've just had removed the security of thinking that we've got a fuel cap for 2 years, and now we're not sure. And what that does is increase people's anxiety, increase their sense of insecurity, people's feelings of shame in relation to not being able to heat their homes or their families. And that's just one aspect of poverty. That's just fuel poverty. We also heard really compelling evidence about food insecurity. We've got 9.7 million adults in fuel poverty in this country at the moment, 4 million children. And these are figures from the Food Foundation that were released yesterday, so they're really hot off the press. More than half of families who are receiving universal credit are food insecure. So our social security net, which is supposed to underpin and protect and look after people, isn't fit for purpose in this cost of living crisis. Fuel poverty, food poverty, actual poverty, all of these things have direct effects on people's physical and mental health, but they really also affect people's well-being with sort of devastating consequences. It's really important to say that data always lag behind. So we're in a cost of living crisis that's really changing very, very fast, and we won't have great data on its consequences until probably after it's already over. We are, however, in Bradford and elsewhere in Yorkshire, starting to get engaged in some like real-time data collection that should inform what's going on. But we really are in a crisis that will have short-term, medium and long-term effects on people's health and well-being. So I'm really pleased to be here today and to hear about everything that Bradford Credit Union is doing to help protect people in this crisis.
Okay, that's fantastic overview. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but what do you think should be the immediate actions that could be taken to increase the ability of our communities to cope with this current crisis? Do you think there are any?
Well, I don't mind being on the spot because, you know, we all do need to be put on the spot. I mean, obviously there are some sort of immediate mitigation things that we can do, and we've heard about some of them already today, and we'll hear of others. You know, things like communities creating warm spaces where people can go and be warm and be together. Things like food savers and uniform savers. But those things, those mitigate poverty now. And what we really need to be thinking about, of course, are things that create resilience longer term. But I think actually everything that credit union is doing has both of those things coupled in, doesn't it? It's about helping people today, but it's also about creating resilience for the future. So yes, there's lots that we can do at the moment, nationally, locally, and in communities. But we always, I think, need to be focused on that creation of resilience for the future as well.
Fantastic, thank you. I've got a question for Javed now. So Yorkshire has a diverse range of communities. As the leader of a community organisation, how are the people that you work with experiencing and responding to this crisis?
With difficulty. I think it's obvious that in terms of organisations, it's really difficult. I think we've got to realise, and I think everyone knows, we've we're kind of coming out of COVID as well, which has had a massive impact on people's well-being, as well as financially, physically, and mentally. So that impact itself is had a dire effect on people. And on top of that, like you said, we're now going through another crisis: poverty, fuel, economy, everything. All these things compound, obviously, both the people's well-being. In terms of organisations, it's really difficult because they're also stressed. A lot of people did a lot of things in terms of supporting communities during COVID, where we set up food banks, where we set up a number of different services to try and help and cope communities at local level. But that was, again, very much coming together. What we've seen now with individuals is their own personal circumstances is becoming worse. Food poverty is massive. The cost of increase on those, where people are giving to community organisations like us who run food banks and etc. It's not the same anymore. People are having more problems of their own, so they're not giving. So that means the impact on charities is greater to try and find other resources, other finances, other help to support some of those groups. I mean, we've heard about a lot of initiatives that are going on, but individually, I mean, we've heard of families where kids are moving back in with parents stuff because obviously they can't afford to live on their own. So that's happening more. People are going out less, trying to eat more together. But one of the problems we've also seen is that the increase in the cost of food, etc., has been massive. And unfortunately, what we've seen is that some of the fast food outlets, some of that food is cheaper to actually buy, which then impacts on health. So instead of looking at trying to eat healthier, people are looking at their finances saying, well, you know, I can feed a family of 4 with something, I don't know, chicken chips for £10, where trying to buy a healthy meal and cook it can cost up to £20–30. So that's been obviously something that's been on the agenda for a lot of people. So it's difficult to deal with that. Yeah, Yorkshire's diverse, massively diverse. So obviously in each community it's different. Amongst the Asian community, BME community, we have, you know, there is a history of extended families. So some of that joint finances helps to cope with some of the things. But then obviously you're also thinking it does, you do have a joint income, but because everything else is increasing with the cost of utility, the cost of food, the difference isn't as much as it perhaps used to be. So yeah, it's become more difficult.
Thank you. And a similar question to Salim as well. So you obviously work with people in financial crisis. What kind of issues do people come to you with, and is that changing?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. To put this into perspective, 2021 was a record year for the number of people that we helped in Leeds. By the 1st of July 2022, we'd helped the same number of people as it had done in the whole of 2021. And from the 1st of September to the end of September was a record month. So, and already in October, looking like it's going to beat September. So what we're really seeing now is a number of people needing help. First of all, that's the first thing I'd like to say. And I think we're just at the beginning of the next wave. So it's only really going to get worse and intensify. The kind of support that we're getting from clients has been a massive demand for people struggling with just to be able to buy food. That's been one of the big issues. The second big issue is energy. People are already struggling to pay their energy bills, and that's only going to get worse through the next winter months. And now with the uncertainty of the energy cap likely to be going up again in April next year, probably the region of about £4,500, that unless the government do come back in and review it and make some more measures, that's going to cause a lot of problems for people into 2023 and probably into 2024. We're seeing a big increase in number of people now struggling for what we call emergency debt advice. What I mean by that is clients are now being chased, particularly by councils, really, for the council tax being taken to court. A number of people getting calls from bailiffs looking to take their possessions. That's increasing, and of course energy disconnections. And we're seeing for people on prepayment meter the big increase in people thinking that they're going to self-disconnect. In other words, they won't top up their meters unless they're getting some support. We've been able to offer some support through that. I know other organisations have as well. but it's been a really, it's just intensifying. So overall, everything on the radar is looking red, and I think it's going to go. I think the volcano is going to erupt probably towards the end of this year, probably January, in terms of helping, having the resources to help people. So it's a really, really difficult call. So that's where that's the picture that we're seeing at the moment. And sorry, what was the second part of the question? There was a second part of the question. Sorry, I've just.
It was, has that changed over the past few months? I think you've covered.
What we're also seeing, is we're seeing a rise in number of people on pretty good incomes, ordinarily, 35, 45, even £50,000 a year, who are now coming in for help and support with budgeting. They're finding ways of actually cutting their costs. They're pretty much leveraged. And what I mean by that is that they've borrowed already, the mortgage is quite high, and interest rates are starting to climb and going to get even higher. So we are seeing people who are needing help in what would be non-traditional client base.
Thank you.
Just something on that. You talked about people on prepayment meters. I mean, that's something that could be looked at, because in some instances, some of those tariffs are far higher than people paying to normal. So that's something I think the energy companies should potentially be looking at.
Definitely. I was in a meeting a couple of 3 weeks ago with the deputy director of the Ofgem, who set the price cap, and actually put it to him as to why the price cap for standing charge for electricity was doubled in March this year. And I didn't really get a very good answer to that, other than basically protecting the energy industry. And I did put it to him that the energy industry must be laughing at Ofgem, because they seem to be very much on the side of the energy industry rather than the client. They've heard that message firmly. Agree with you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. James, I just want to come to you next. Obviously, the current crisis can be made even harder for people who struggle with further challenges. And can you describe a bit about the people that your organisation works to protect?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, and thanks for having me. Something that may not be on your radar, but I would advocate certainly has to be, especially in this climate, is gambling and gambling related harms. It's inevitably going to be presented by the industry as a way of making money, making quick money. I myself know that that is not the case. I'm in recovery from a 12-year gambling addiction that started at 16 years old with a £5 bet, and it turned a normal, bright, happy young boy into a helpless, hopeless wreck of a man. And it was only gambling that did that. I had no other traumas, or I don't think I've got an addictive personality. And it stripped everything from me. It caused depression, it caused anxiety, it caused self-loathing, shame, guilt, suicidal thoughts. And of course, it involved severe debt. I had 20 payday loans at one point. I'm now 4.5 years in recovery, and I'm still paying debts back. And there is obviously some responsibility on the banks, on the payday loan companies, but on the gambling companies. They knew how much I was gambling, and instead of intervening, were incentivizing me to gamble more. During my recovery, I've been very fortunate enough to work for a charity called Gambling with Lives, which was sadly set up by families who had lost loved ones to gambling related suicide, predominantly young men, but not exclusively. Similar stories to me, and that could have been my parents involved in this charity. I'm now head of education there, which raises awareness of the risks amongst young people, but we also support bereaved families. So if you ever come across a family bereaved by gambling related suicide, please point them in the direction. And this is an issue that is killing at least one person every single day in this country. I haven't met one recovering gambling addict that didn't either contemplate or attempt suicide. And Public Health England said over 400 people every year. And that's just those. That's not taken into account millions of people are addicted or at risk of being so. Millions more are being harmed by someone else's gambling. It is no exaggeration to say this is a severe public health crisis that needs action.
Thank you. Thanks so much, James, for sharing your story. And yeah, it's really powerful. Can you tell us anything about what your organisation does to protect people?
Yes, indeed. So we obviously support bereaved families and raise awareness, but we're a very vigorous campaigning organisation too, and we're up against a gambling industry that makes £14 billion a year, and the vast majority of that profit comes from people like me who are addicted or at risk of being so. Most of their profits now come from online slots and casino products, which carry much higher forms of addiction at risk. So we campaign strongly to get the government to review the outdated gambling laws in this country, which is currently happening. Like everything, it's been kicked into the long grass, delayed for 3 times now, I believe. And we're hoping to get a white paper on gambling laws where we're asking for making the product much safer and slower, a levy on industry profits to fund research, education, treatment, affordability checks, which would be massive, and action on advertising as well. The industry spends £1.5 billion a year on advertising, and that's to get more people like me, the next generation of gamblers, to feed that profit. And one of the work I lead on is for a campaign called The Big Step, which is trying to get gambling advertising and sponsorship out of football. Because for those that like football, current situation, 700 gambling adverts in one 90-minute Premier League match means that up to 90% of match of the day has a gambling advert visible. And this is impacting a lot of people, and that's why we need urgent change to the gambling laws.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, James. I've got a question now for, I guess, mainly for, well, James, Celine or Javed. So a lot of people might not recognise that they need help with finances or know that support is out there if they are in need. So how can we better support people to recognise when they need help and to seek that help?
If I can come back off something James was saying about advertising, we can work this the other way. You know, the sector is very poor on advertising marketing. That might be because they don't have the budget for it, but it's no coincidence that organisations that have budgets that market and advertise tend to get clientele and can tend to keep people, what's the word, in love with the brand. And you know, a lot of media psychologists will tell you that branding is a shortcut to reward in the human brain, and it's very hard to break that. So why don't we use the same strategies to promote the services and kind of support and dispel some of the myths around you know, the stigmas around getting advice and getting support, particularly if people are in debt and people are feeling very guilty or ashamed. And why don't we turn that around and use the same strategies, same marketing methods to get that message out there? And that will start then to normalise the support that is available to people to help people feel safe. So that's maybe one strategy that we could use. In terms of helping people, you know, who find it very hard to recognise, again, marketing and messaging would be very useful in that, and coming up with some very useful case studies as to helping people prevent, you know, what the situation is, because it's very hard to somebody to recognise a problem unless they probably feel the pain of the problem. So I haven't quite got all the answers to that. Maybe some of the colleagues in here might be able to help with that too.
I think you're absolutely right. Marketing is really important, but I think employers have a potential to do that, because obviously one of the problems is that, like you said, there's a lot of people who now might be in full-time employment, might be getting salaries, but there's some of the people who are most vulnerable because most of them are borrowed to the hilt with a mortgage and everything else. So the potential to work with employers to try and recognise that early and see what help can be available through that, and through schools, because obviously, you know, schools have access to kids who are going through who may be on school meals, who, you know, we've had reports of kids going in with a food box, but there's nothing in there. Yeah. They're going in because they have no food, but, you know, to keep that face, they're taking an empty box with them. So, you know, working with the school to try and highlight that before it becomes a major problem. But you'll always have that stigma. You'll always have that stigma of pride and not wanting to show, you know, whether you're in debt or whether it's an addiction or whether, you know, it's food poverty. So it's trying to get that across to people that unfortunately we're in a time that this has almost become a norm, even for the average family, that they're all struggling. You're not alone. And I think that's the key thing about what Slim said when promoting. We've got to take that stigma away that this is you as an individual, you know, you're on your own. As a society, people, you know, we've seen it with other stats, which Kate mentioned earlier, they're increasing, you know, and it's, you're not in a minority, if anything, you're a majority right now. So if you need that support, get out there. There is support there.
What is encouraging is that employers are starting to contact organisations like ourselves and asking to go into their organisations and support their staff directly. You know, we've been approached by the NHS in Leeds, and we're actually in 2 hospitals supporting the staff on, you know, on the difficulties that people are facing. And we are getting calls from other organisations. So Javed, on that, it's good to see that employers are starting to think about this more seriously and up the ante, for sure.
Thank you. That's really, really important point. Thank you. Salim, I've just got time for one last question. Salim, I just wanted to touch on payday money lending and loan sharks, because obviously that's something that people might turn to in desperation in a similar way that they might turn to gambling, you know, seeing it as a way out of their struggles. So could you just explain a bit about that and about what you might do to support people in that situation?
Yes, I mean, loan sharks will no doubt be out there in swaths at the moment, and yeah, causing a lot of grief for people. Well, we won't be exclusive in this, but we offer a confidential and safe space for people to be able to report loan sharks anonymously. And one of the ways that we approach this, just to conform anybody who's not quite clear what a loan shark is. A loan shark is basically an unregulated lender. They don't have the legal permissions to lend money. And of course, what they want to do is they want to get people to become lifelong slaves to these loan sharks. So they basically become their cash machines, and they cause misery for people's lives and threaten them very, very heavily. So what we do is, when we speak to clients, we don't say, are you the victim of a loan shark? Because very few people are going to admit to that. What we'll do is say, you know, if you know somebody who's ever come across this, or you might not have heard of this team called the illegal money lending team or stop loan shark team. And the kind of thing they do is, if somebody's got in the grasp of a loan shark, what they'll do is they will trap them, they'll catch them, they'll get them put away. And we have a colleague who you can just have a chat with anonymously, who will explain exactly how they work. And what happens is that basically they relieve the misery of people's lives. And so they're a very effective team and very, very strong team. So I would implore anybody who's dealing with clients at the moment just to sort of mention in a more probably softer positioning way that, you know, if you ever come across this, have you heard about this team? This is how they work. And then what happens is people tend to come back to you a little bit later on and say, you know, actually, can I make that call, or would you make that call for me to your colleague? And that way, then the illegal money lending team step in and then take the action that they need to do.
Thank you. That's fun. Sorry.
I can share a short story with you on, but you might not have time for that. Anyway.
Ian, I'll defer to you as to whether we've got time. I'd love to hear it, but I'm not sure.
Thank you. That was absolutely fascinating segment. We are spot on time, and I'm aware I do want to give some time at the questions and answers. Thank you everyone for coming on. You've been absolutely amazing. So thank you to everyone, and Sarah for leading that section. That's brilliant. Okay, so if I could ask you to take off your cameras and go on mute while I bring in the next segment. So that'll be Robert Kelly's going to be leading on this. Robert, Chad and Renee, if you are there, if you can bring your cameras on, the last set, turn your cameras off. Lovely. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. And Chad, are you there?
Yes, I am.
You are.
Hi, Ian.
Fantastic. You're joining us from remind us where you are.
I'm in the state of Wisconsin here in the United States.
That's right. And what's the time for you this morning?
It's 10:18 in the morning. So
thank you.
Wonderful time for
thank you for coming on so early. Of course, we got a chance to meet just recently in Madison. That was wonderful. And Renee, what time is it for you? Where were you now?
So well, first of all, thank you everyone, and really a privilege to be in this webinar. Thank you, Ian. So I actually work out of the island of Puerto Rico, but today I'm working out of our main offices in New York City. It is 11:19 a.m.
Fantastic, excellent. Robert, I'm going to hand over to yourself. You can introduce this segment, pick up and take us a direction that you want to go in.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I was going to say welcome back, but it's welcome back for myself. So great to see everyone again. Thank you to Chad and to Rennie for joining us for this segment. Apologies again that I had to drop off. And I think for this piece, I'm going to bring Chad and Rennie in separately in a second, but we wanted to focus on the community development credit union idea that we have as a specific project for ABCUL involving Bradford District and 4 other credit unions, and with the hope that we can add a couple more across the country. And so just to recap on that in terms of some of the objectives, and then I'll bring Chad in just to give his perspective of the US system and, you know, the National Credit Union Foundation's view of this work. You know, for us, I think it's really important that we state that we are looking to provide or replicate wherever possible all of the positive elements of the community development CDFI stroke designation that exists within the US system. And Inclusive, Rennie's organisation has been a vital part of developing that agenda and working with credit unions to look at their accreditation, to understand the demographics that they serve, to look at the investment opportunities that are available, whether that's through subordinated debt or through grant income, and to give us a flavour of the difference that this makes on the ground, because we have been really struck by the capability of the credit unions in question making a real tangible difference to ordinary people and communities all across the States. And I think that's so important in terms of what you've heard already from the Bradford and District story, what's happening on the ground in terms of a reaction to the cost of living crisis. But not only that, the work that's been done through the support of the council over many, many years now, supporting the Ian's role and the other development agendas that have been in place. And you can see the tangible difference in the leadership that Bradford has shown, not only in terms of the credit union, but also the local authority. And I think it's one of the best examples that I've seen within the credit union sector. You know, probably the accent gives it away, Glasgow native, and Glasgow City Council worked in tandem with the credit union sector for many, many years, and still does in some respects, around developing the agenda. Glasgow is the credit union capital of GB. 25% of the population across the city are credit union members, a very strong ethos in terms of people and helping people, strong foundations around trade unionism, Irish immigration, local authority support. You know, many of the largest credit unions originated from public sector bodies and how very similar to Bradford. So we've got lots of great examples of where credit unions that get the right support and can collaborate with the right stakeholders can really make, can take real strong strides to supporting many, many more people across their field of membership and providing the products and services that relate and that matter. And so what we want to do with this CDCU project is to build a structure, look at the infrastructure that's in place in the States, learn from all those best bits, and to build a specification. We've been really lucky to have support from Citibank to kickstart this project, and I'd like to recognise them on the call, recognise that support, and also the opportunity for us to work so closely with Inclusive as a trade body over many years now, and that's been a fantastic development opportunity for us in learning, and hopefully that's been reciprocated in terms of some opportunities for Inclusive members and the staff team as well. So the ultimate objective here is that we build a strong specification that we can share with stakeholders and potential funders, whether that's HM Treasury, whether that's organisations like local authorities or Fair for All Finance or others, devolved administrations across Scotland and Wales as well, and that the criteria for developing these ideas, that it's clear to credit unions and that they can look closely at the data analytics, which is another huge element of this project, and making sure that we understand who we serve and how we can do that in a more robust and effective way, and that we empower communities and empower financial futures, which is the theme for the World Council's International Credit Union Day celebrations kickstarting tomorrow. So that's the background. We are right at the start of this journey. It's been a huge amount of learning from everyone involved. As I say, we were delighted to have 5 credit unions represented in Madison in August. and ABCUL will now, in conjunction with those credit unions and with support from your credit union partner in the States and the colleagues that we've got on the call, that we will look forward to building that specification and starting to share with stakeholders and credit unions, most importantly, in the months ahead, so that we can see the opportunities that may be available to underpin balance sheets, to support new product and service development, and to make sure that we're serving many more people across communities like Bradford and others all across the country. So if I can come to Chad first. Chad, thank you for being here and joining us today. Can you just give any observations from your side in terms of the US system, the CDCU project that we started to work on, and any other learnings that you think would be relevant to this project and the wider GB credit union sector, please?
Certainly. Thanks, Robert. Thank you, Ian, and everyone. It's an honor to be here with you. I'm Chad Helmanak. I'm the Chief Impact Officer for the National Credit Union Foundation. So very quickly, our nonprofit is working with credit unions across the country to provide best practice, grants, and other forms of support to help credit unions try to do the work very much like what you're doing in the Bradford District. I learned a lot about the work through Ian and this visit to Madison, and a lot of great best practice that we feel needs to be emulated back here and credit unions are working on. So having said that, things are very different, but also very much the same. The energy costs up 15% year over year here in the US. Food insecurity is a constant and rising issue. The inequities across income and wealth. The one that we're really focused on right now is affordable housing, and I could talk a little bit about that. So there are a lot of parallels in the issues we're facing due to inflation and what's going on in the economy. What credit unions are doing, and this is the power of this international credit union system, is working together to understand how can we play a bigger role in this. And for the past many years, the products and services of credit unions has been there for people to help them. And we're seeing more and more that it's not enough, that we need to bring community partners into the picture. We need to combine our philanthropic efforts with what we're trying to do in terms of our strategy. And what that strategy is helping people improve their lives through financial services. And beyond that, looking at issues of hunger and housing, not from the lens of product and services, but from the perspective that we're here to help human beings live better lives and serve them with dignity and take care of them and their future. So having said all that, I swim in a lot of data and best practice working with credit unions. I can tell you that we do have that innovation happening here. But at the same time, inspired by the work that you're doing in the Bradford District, and it's remarkable. And I think, this is, again, I'll just underscore, Robert, and any other points you'd like me to make, the power of coming together on a webinar like this to learn together. And I'm happy to share that best practice as we move forward.
Thank you, Chad, and as always, a great friend to everything that we do in the GB sector, and we really appreciate your time. I'll bring you back in a second, Chad, but I wanted just to bring Rennie in just to give a flavour of the work that Inclusive do across North America, and just to give an indication to everyone that's on the webinar, maybe the art of the possible here in terms of what we can learn from your experience in terms of rolling out the sort of CDCU, CDFI designation, and what difference that makes to communities across the US. Rennie, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Ian, again for the invitation. Good to see you, Chad, and thanks to the National Credit Union Foundation for everything that you do. Now, Inclusive is a national association of around 493 community development credit unions that serve 18.3 million people in 48 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. We were created about 40 years ago with a mission to help our credit union better serve their community and to promote financial inclusion and community development. Now, our member community development credit unions, and you'll hear a lot about this term, and I know that this is part of what Robert, your team is trying to adopt for the UK. They deliver safe and affordable financial services and loans in underserved and underlooked and overlooked communities in the United States. They do all kinds of loans, for the smallest flexible loans to meet emergencies and keep people safe and out of payday lender lines, to small businesses and mortgages in general. Now, as part of our work, many of our, pretty much about 60% of our members are CDFI credit unions, and I'm not going to go into the CDFI designation model of what that means. I know that it has a different connotation in the United Kingdom, and of course we don't want to go into that. But it's important to point out that these credit unions are really in tune and connected to the communities that they serve, and they tailor their products and services to accommodate those communities. And that might be low and moderate income communities, immigrant communities, or just your run-of-the-mill communities throughout the United States. Now, one of the initiatives that we manage is called the Juntos Avanzamos initiative, which is one of the main reasons that I was invited here to this webinar. Now, Juntos Avanzamos is actually a financial inclusion framework. It's a designation as well for particular credit unions and a network of credit unions that are committed to the financial inclusion of everyone, including immigrant populations. Now, this designation pretty much was created in the 2000s by the Cornerstone Credit Union League. This is a credit union league that represents credit unions in Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. And initially, it was developed as an Hispanic outreach initiative to make sure that credit unions were better serving the Hispanic and immigrant populations that were arriving to the United States. Then after 2015, this designation was taking national in conjunction with inclusive. And whenever you hear about a credit union that has received the Juntos Avanzamos designation, you'll generally hear that they accept alternate forms of immediate account opening, that they do loans for people that do not have social security numbers, that they have bilingual staff, that they have alternate forms of establishing creditworthiness. But for a credit union to be able to have this Juntos Avanzamos designation, which is a prestigious designation, they have to go through a designation process, sort of something similar that what you're trying to build in the UK, but with a focus on serving immigrant communities. Now, I won't go into detail in terms of what that means, but I will go a bit into how the structure generally works. So it's important to point out that the Juntos Avanzamos designation is not a government-run designation. It is a designation that belongs to the credit union movement, and any credit union that wants to become Juntos Avanzamos designated can join the process. We're not looking to exclude credit unions. We want everybody to be able to meet the Juntos Avanzamos financial inclusion framework and guidelines, right? So to become a Juntos Avanzamos designated credit union, a credit union must meet several basic financial inclusion related standards and undergo an application and verification and peer evaluation process. These standards are contained in an application that is points-based. So a credit union that is interested, say, in getting the Juntos Avanzamos designation, if it were your case in getting a community development credit union designation, if that were to be built out in the UK, and we hope that it does, the credit union knows from the application exactly what is expected, what the criteria are that the credit union has to meet. And those criteria are basically cover all of the credit union's operations. And they include knowledge that the credit union's board member have about their communities. It includes training to personnel. It includes product development and design, making sure that the products that we develop as credit unions, the credit unions develop, are relevant to the communities they serve and to the people that they're and to the social issues that they're trying to address through the credit union. There's a section that covers strategy. There's a section that focuses on marketing, print collateral, campaigns, where do we advertise? What's the signage in our brands? And then there's another section that focuses on community partnerships. Are we working with all the stakeholders who are in community? Do we have partnerships like Bradford has with the municipality, for example? And so a credit union that's interested in the designation sees the application, can use it as a framework, can actually auto evaluate themselves and decide, hey, I'm almost there. This is something that I'm not doing that would be great if I did, really help my community. And then they submit the application That application is evaluated, and then it goes to a committee that is made up of different credit union practitioners from throughout the United States. They represent each region of the US. That evaluation is looked at, and then if the credit union meets the criteria, they receive the Juntos Avanzamos designation. Now, depending on where the credit union is, the process can take 4 months to 2 or 3 years. You've had those cases. As of today, there are 128 credit unions in the US that have this designation and meet the criteria set out for Juntos Avanzamos designation. The committee is also generally, the designation and the network is also guided by an advisory committee that is made up of league and associations in the United States and other industry partners, including your credit union partner, for example, is a member of the advisory committee, and they guide the general growth and expansion and promotion of the program. Now, in terms of the US, what I would say, in terms of the UK, what I would say is, depending on what you're looking at, I think that will be very important for you to have, like, what criteria, what do you see are the best practices that you want to see reflected for a community development credit union in the UK, taking into consideration, your particular culture, your particular financial system, the legal ramifications of your organizations, the products that you offer. Establish those criteria, put them down, make sure that everybody, or at least that all stakeholders agree on it, and then have that framework. Make sure that everybody feels that they can meet those criteria, that they can be a community development credit union, provide the tools and resources for a credit union to be able to make it, right? If they decide to go down that road and have constituents buy-in. Those are the lessons that we've learned from the Juntos Avanzamos designation. That, of course, we're always available to share with you, Robert, and also with Ian and everybody in the UK.
Thank you, Renee. I'm just going to bring Chad back in, and then we'll try and maybe do a wrap up, Ian, and hopefully keep Chad and Renee, myself and yourself available for any questions, or anyone else that can contribute. I'm conscious, Chad, that you've performed a number of different roles within the credit union industry across the US, whether at league trade body level, in credit unions, or now on a sort of more national scale through the foundation and in other places. One of the things that we've talked about a lot in recent times in the UK GB is around the need for serving a balanced and a diversified demographic, and making sure that the service and product range that credit unions are for everyone, and that we've worked extremely hard to move away from some of those previous sort of comments that we were a poor person's bank. What is there anything you can share in terms of your experience of anything similar within the States and how that's been managed? And the second question is, and I know you and I have talked about this a lot over the years, the work that's been done around empathy and empathy mapping, and the role that plays in making sure that credit unions are providing the right outcomes for consumers. Can you just share a little bit of the backstory of the role that empathy plays? So 2 questions, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thank you, Robert. So to the first question, the role of the credit union within the community, there's 2 parts of it. One is evident in the conversation today. It's being out in the community, understanding your community. The second piece is understanding the data pieces. And Renee and Inclusive as an organization is one of the best, if not the best partner in the US credit union system to help credit unions understand what that looks like through the work of the CDFI and all the work they do with Juntos Avanzamos. And it's about wrapping all this around, because when we talk about these issues, Robert, we often feel like we're overwhelming people. Where do we begin? And we like to begin with two pieces to understand and frame this problem and what it exactly is, and think about our audience. The first one is this idea of financial well-being for all. It is the epicenter of everything we do at the National Credit Union Foundation. And we feel it is the embodiment of the traditional credit union mission and the future of our business, because if we become that traditional financial institution, we lose everything that makes us great, and we undermine our ability to truly help people. So how we look at that from a qualitative or a quantitative perspective is we look at the ideas of spending, saving, borrowing, and planning in the short and long term. So we have 8 different components to look at. And what that allows us to do when we talk about to members and people in our community, not just what do your account balances look like, but how do you feel about your money? And what do those feelings and emotions do? There's this element of sometimes shame or embarrassment in talking about these issues. So I say all that to say the data piece can help us understand what are the real issues out there. When we look at it in the United States from the high level, a national perspective, 2/3 of Americans are what we consider financially vulnerable or coping. That means in those 4 areas I mentioned of spending, saving, borrowing, and planning, they are struggling with at least one or several, if not all, components there to plan their money in the short and long term, so in terms of budget and planning for retirement, struggling. So that goes down a wormhole, but a really important one to understand that people are struggling out there. And then the work that Inclusive does, especially around Hispanic markets and communities in the US, if we don't understand who's living in our communities and the needs they have and how unique those are, we can't tailor our products and services. We can wait all day for people to come to us, but until we step out, we understand the data and have those conversations, we can't fully evolve and innovate as a credit union. The second piece, and I'm kind of rolling into this to your second question, is around this idea of empathy. We feel that credit unions have an element of empathy baked into our business model. We have this great ability to, because we have a member owner model and we have a board who's elected by our members, and that we are community financial institutions. Whether we formalize that or we think of how we do business, it's true. And so in order to put ourselves in a place where we can succeed as financial institutions, we need to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of those we serve. So we work with credit unions on empathy training. Often this is a sales and service product in credit unions. It's for the front line, people who are working directly with members. And some of that is good work, but at the same time, we need empathy from the top down in our organizations and credit unions to understand how we live that as a business. I'll share one example. We have our collections departments in credit unions across the country. And that's a terrifying thing for people to get a call from collections that I owe money. And usually when people are getting a call from the credit union to get collections, you haven't paid your loan on time, where's that payment? They're getting other calls as well. There's an element of overwhelmingness, and people turn away from that. They turn it off. So as credit unions, there's power not just in understanding people and approaching people in a very human level. I understand what this might be like for you, and I want to help you. Something as simple as that kind of approach changes the dynamic. It encourages people to pick up the phone and talk to us, knowing that we're here for you. We're not chasing you down. We're not going to garnish your wages, but we want to make sure that your credit score at the end of the day and your ability to live a good life is kept however we can as a credit union paramount. So we do empathy mapping. Robert, you mentioned that. It's around understanding and really tying these two questions and ideas together. It's understanding who's in our community and going through a process to understand what's that really like, because the risk there is making assumptions. What we think they want is maybe not what they want or what they need. So empathy mapping, working with focus groups, bringing in community partners, again, very much like what we're doing today, to understand what's really happening in our communities and where can credit unions find places to step in. We have large credit unions here in the US. There's one state employees credit union in the state of North Carolina that has done work to build what's called a CUSO, a credit union service organization. And they've had this in business for years. It's essentially an independent business arm of their credit union. Turn foreclosures into affordable rental properties. So the credit union turns a situation where they would have a house on the books that they would have to sell or find somebody to sell on their behalf into a property that people in their community can afford. And they've got more than 1,000 properties there. We have credit unions and they're a large credit union, but they're also small and mid-sized credit unions. So it's not really about size. Pairing up to make donations and work deeply with housing coalitions to build affordable housing rental units. The problem in the US, one of the problems specifically, is a housing shortage, not just the affordability and cost of housing, but also just the amount of what can I buy out there. And also a lot of single owner houses, the suburb model, the sprawl of the cities. There's a big focus right now. The one area that is growing is rental properties. The affordability costs is that issue is still there with rental properties, rental costs going up. And I know that is similar in the UK. However, there are 5 or 6 credit unions out in the northwest part of the country who have partnered with the Housing Coalition to build new rental properties that will remain affordable for more than I think that's 250 units. So there's a systemic approach here. There is this, what can we do today? What can we do now to tailor who we are as a credit union to meet those needs and practice empathy? And then there are these broader and larger systemic issues. And that's, again, looking at what you're doing in Bradford District, thinking about the anti-poverty initiatives that you have. That's very interesting. And I would say I struggle to find parallels with that on the community level here in the US. Largely that's, left to nonprofits and the government piece, it's not always there. So I'll stop there because I could go on and on, Robert, but I hope I've addressed your 2 questions and gave some context to kind of some of the parallels in US and UK.
Absolutely. As always, Chad, thank you so much. I think some great inspiration there. I think a prompt in terms of how we can look at product and service development that's co-designed with end users in mind. I think that's so important. I'm just going to come, one question for Rennie just quickly, and then I'll pass to Ian just to do the wrap up and see if there's any final questions from the audience. This is something that Chad mentioned, Rennie, and I just wanted to get your observations on how important tone from the top and culture is in terms of the success factors for CDCU, CDFI, Hinchliffe having Gallows status for inclusive members. How does that work, and what are the success factors that are required?
Chad is completely right. It's essential. One of the main aspects that we look at when evaluating a credit union is, first of all, we look at board diversity. Does the board look like the community that the credit union serves? That's the first thing. And then the second part is does the credit union have effective mechanisms for receiving information from the community? What partnerships do they have? And do the policies and procedures that the credit union has in place reflect that, right? So technically, you could launch a new loan product. You can say, you're reaching out to the community, you're serving the immigrant population, for example. But if your board, if your executive suite does not transmit this commitment, does not understand the community, and does not pass that through to the staff, it's more often rather than not, it's going to fail. It'll be a public relations event. And, a ton of the work that we try to do is making boards and executives understand, the makeup of their communities, and then the most effective ways to be able to serve the communities, and then transmit that to all of the staff so that the staff is aware of that. But then on the other end, also making sure that your staff believes in that initiative and believes in what you're doing and understands what you're doing is also as important as the top-down culture, right? If the board tries to implement a particular initiative that looks great on paper, but the staff doesn't understand that, doesn't feel empathy toward who's coming to the credit union, doesn't really get it, it's probably gonna be a failure, not successful at all. So we generally recommend, making sure that the board is aware of the makeup of the community. If you're going to deploy a particular initiative, making sure that you understand the demographics, that you understand the culture, that what you're designing makes sense and just doesn't necessarily sound good, that your employees understand what's going on, that you have institutional buy-in from every stakeholder in the institution, and that they're trying to be able to do so appropriately.
Thank you, Renee. Really, really appreciate that. Any last thoughts, Robert, on that?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank Renee and Chad, a couple of, as always, and everyone that's participated today. I think, you know, for me, a couple of the observations that we made in Madison during the study visit was understanding data better is so important. It's such a vital concept in this development journey, and that the collaboration, cooperation are absolutely fundamental as well. Understanding the consumers and the members that you serve and the communities that we serve in is critical, and I think we recognise that that's something we need to work harder at, and hopefully there are some additional resources to add that as part of the partnership. So there's one question that's came in, and I think it's really important, Ian, that we pick that up from Gareth Easom in terms of consumer duty. For anyone that doesn't know what consumer duty is, it's a new initiative from the conduct regulator here in the UK, the FCA, to try and embed the principles of treating customers fairly and ensuring that consumers get good outcomes when it comes to financial services, products and services that they choose and that they interact with. And that will be a more robust regime in terms of more evidence-based, making sure that credit unions and other financial services firms can evidence the outcomes, the product design, the understanding in the markets that they serve, making sure that products are aligned to the right interests of consumers. So we are working behind the scenes on that as a trade association at the moment for our members, but I think Gareth picks up a really important point that we have to weave that consumer duty and those principles and guidelines into the CDCU model and make sure that that is just as a fundamental pillar of the structure, the infrastructure and the success factors for any credit union that will hold this designation in the future. So on behalf of ABCUL, thank you to everyone that's been involved, for our team, for behind the scenes logistics, to Ian, as always, for showing remarkable leadership in his network and within Bradford District Credit Union to showcase these initiatives in collaboration with the council. And also just a shout out to the other members of the party, the travelling party that went to Madison as well. Karen Bennett at Enterprise Credit Union, Ravi Virendram at Lewisham Plus Credit Union, Cheryl Gale at London Plus Credit Union, and also Theresa Manning at Clockwise Credit Union. So in addition to Ian, those 4 other individuals will form part of our project team, and we will be looking to reach out to a couple of other credit unions to assist us in this journey. So we are at the start. We will undoubtedly learn from our friends and colleagues in the States, Chad and Renee and others. Thank you on behalf of ABCUL for everyone attending today, and for us having the opportunity to be part of this, Ian, as always. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Over to you.
As always, it's a privilege working with you. I just love networking with people. There's nothing better than getting a webinar where everyone can come on and speak. So thank you to all our speakers today. I've got about 8 minutes to go. I've been monitoring the chat. The chat's pretty much answered itself going through. I think the vast majority of people are on there. Salim, are you still here?
I am.
Salim, just an extra question around the loan sharks. We do a lot in Bradford. I know you do a lot in Leeds. If you were to do one thing about if people are coming off loan sharks and what they can do, that seems to have been picked up in the chat.
In terms of what they can do once they, in terms of actually,
if people come across people knowing this situation.
Yeah, basically, the illegal money lending team are a national team. They're actually based in Birmingham, but they work nationally. And we have contacts, and I'm sure other organisations do, that can actually signpost or refer clients into the loan shark team, into the illegal money lending team, and that's one of the ways to do it. What we find works really well is that soft positioning, rather than saying, as I mentioned earlier, have you had problems with a loan shark? If you're aware of this, did you know there's this team that can actually trap these people and get them put away and save a lot of misery from people's lives, and they're very effective. That's one way of actually selling it.
Thank you very much for that. And Julie, are you there, Julie? Julie Thompson?
I am, yes.
And there was just another question of setting up Food Savers, there was a thing in the chat, it can't have been easy. We know it hasn't been easy at all. But if you would sum up how long it's taken and where you're seeing those results.
I think, well, it was 2 years ago since we set up our first Food Savers, and possibly by next March we'll be nearly into 20. Yeah, it has its challenges. I think we've sort of helped transition a variety. Some of Tessa set up from scratch. Some have been food banks. Some have been sort of affordable food pantries already. So it's been an interesting journey.
It certainly has. And I've really appreciated working with you and with Scott from UniformSavers. That pretty much wraps it up. I think the one thing I hope that people take away from this, I was thinking about how I might sum it up, is that the credit union world, credit union movement is a worldwide movement. It's not only UK based, not even in USA. There are people joining us from Africa and even from Nepal. Most countries have some sort of cooperative way of working, and no matter where you are in the country or what country you're in, look up your local credit union, try to get involved and see what you can do. And for those credit unions that are on with us, the co-design model we have in Bradford can easily be replicated. It's just really seeking out your local authority partners, getting involved, going a lot to meetings, getting to know people, finding out where the gaps are and where credit unions can help form but it's very much relationship based, and that's what we've learned out from that. We're ahead of time. I think I'd like to let everybody go, so I think on that moment I'm going to stop it all. Thank you very much, speakers, for it. Could all speakers stay on at the end? And for everybody else, if you'd like to remove yourselves, that would be brilliant. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.